please welcome to the stage our Professor of Music, Milton Mermikides.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Now, it's quite hard to define art, but I happen to like these two quotes here. Art enables us to find ourselves and lose ourselves at the same time, and art replaces the light that is lost when the day fades. Here we have light that changes our vision, and also that provides a warmth. And this new light can come from many places. For me, it comes from this image, which was taken on Christmas Eve in 1968, the view of our pale blue dot from the other side of the moon. And it's a remarkable time of history where we were able not to see the moon as this romantic, distant object, but in full detail, every crater, and even make it our home for a moment. These 7 years from 1966, our first soft landing on the moon, until 1971, when we were playing golf on it, was a remarkable period of history. And Dark Side of the Moon happens after these 7 years, where we explored outer space in a new light. At the same time, these 7 years saw a remarkable development of this exploration of inner space in the arts, in film, in literature, and also in the tools to make music. Here's some of the amazing albums that happened in that time, and apologies for your favorite album not being there. And at the end of those 7 years, Dark Side of the Moon appears. So Dark Side of the Moon is very much of its time, but at the same time, it's timeless. It has sold 45 million copies and stayed a record-breaking 14 consecutive years in the top 200 albums. And this lecture is about why it's remained so timeless, why it speaks to every generation. Now, I say it is because it speaks on themes that we never escape. One is that of madness and its connection to the moon. So the term lunaticus was first found in 1st century Latin as being moonstruck, and you see it spread across the different languages here on the right. In fact, it's predated by the Greek version, I should know this, Selinia Zete, which means moonstruck, also connected to the Greek goddess of the moon. Why is the moon connected to madness? It is distant and unknown, perhaps, but there's a deeper reason, I suggest, in that it only faces one side towards us. It is tidally locked. And actually Newton, of the prism fame, explained that here in his Principia, that it's locked. But what I like is the metaphor of that dark side of the moon as being part of us. This wonderful quote from Mark Twain, "Everyone is a moon and has a dark side which he never shows to anybody. You have to slip around behind it if you want to see it." Mark Twain was a keen astronomer and was very pleased that he was born at Halley's Comet's visit in 1835, and he left the Earth on its next visit, 1910. Rather neat of him. And the idea of a lunatic as being not part of our society, who's wandered off the path, also has this extra idea that the lunatic or the fool can see more than us sane people. He can speak truth to power, like the Shakespearean fool here. And in fact, the original title of Dark Side of the Moon was A Piece for Assorted Lunatics. And of course, what hangs over both Dark Side of the Moon and the subsequent albums is the spirit of Syd Barrett, Pink Floyd founder, who just at the cusp of Pink Floyd's commercial success and wide fame stepped off the path. And you'll see mentions of moon when it comes to him also. If the banjoin starts playing different tunes, apparently he started playing the wrong tune or no tune at all during their live sets. I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. And also on Shine On You Crazy Diamond, you reach for the secret too soon. You wanted to know something too soon, you cried for the moon. He went on to be a recluse, but continued doing art and music. Here's some of his artwork and his bicycle with a basket and a bell that rings and things to make it look good. What else does Dark Side of the Moon bring? It's a Jungian idea of the collective unconscious. We're here with our sort of first level of immediate consciousness, but he suggested that we all share, we inherit this collective unconscious, a second psychic system, a universal impersonal nature which is identical in all individuals. And that's what Roger Waters, I think, was getting at when he asked the same questions to a bunch of anonymous people. He asked them also to Linda and Paul McCartney, but their answers were too self-conscious, so he didn't use them. And so what you have in the album are the answers to these questions. Here's one of the questions with some collected answers.
Yeah. I was in the right.
Yes, absolutely in the right.
I certainly was in the right.
Yeah, I was definitely in the right. That geezer was cruising for a bruising.
Familiar to you now, but I asked the same questions to the audience, and I got a whole bunch of very interesting answers which could easily have made it on the album. I like, do you ever think about the Dark Side of the Moon? I feel like I've been there. It's one of my favorites. Are you frightened of dying? If it was that bad, everyone wouldn't keep doing it. And if I am mad, I hide it well. All of these could have made it on the album. Oh, the collective colours. There's the pie chart. Green came out tops. There's another theme, which is the things that divide us, not that make us universal. These arbitrary lines of the map that separate each of us and why we impose them. This comes out strong in Us and Them, and it has echoes of Wilfred Owen, the First World War poet, who was the first to question so beautifully why he was fighting people that were like him. This is one of his handwritten poems from the trenches, which was published posthumously. And there's a beautiful poem called Strange Meeting, where he meets his German enemy, and it says, "I am the enemy you killed, my friend," which highlights the arbitrary nature of these lines on the map. And of course, there's time and mortality. You run and you run to catch up the sun, but it's sinking, racing around to come up behind you again. This we see in everything from the Bible. A generation goes and a generation comes, but the earth remains forever. These lines, the sun rises and the sun goes down and hastens to the place where it rises. It's a pure parallel to it. We see it in the Renaissance art with the memento mori, and also in Shakespeare's Macbeth, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. The idea that the earth is outpacing us and our brief candles are outed. Everyone having a fun evening so far? And how do we spend our short lives? Well, like Sisyphus, whose punishment for trying to cheat death was to roll a boulder up a hill endlessly, we willingly do the same. We get a good job with more pay, run, rabbit, run, dig that hole, forget the sun. And when at last the work is done, don't sit down, it's time to dig another one. In the subsequent album, Roger Waters pointed this cynicism to the music industry in the incredible Have a Cigar. Come in here, dear boy, have a cigar, you're going to go far, you're going to fly, you're never going to die. And this remarkable line, the band is just fantastic, that is really what I think, oh, by the way, which one's pink? And in Orwellian fashion to capitalism in general, welcome my son, welcome to the machine. What did you dream? It's all right, we told you what to dream. All these conspire to bring an existential angst. Even the track, Any Colour You Like, which I thought was some happy, trippy name when I was younger, is a reference to Ford's car. You can have any colour you like so long as it's black. And so what we have is a questioning of the whole meaning of life. In Breathe, how long you live and high you fly, and smiles you'll give and tears you'll cry, and all you touch and all you see is all your life will ever be. Has echoes in Shakespeare's view of life as being told by an idiot, full of sound and fury and signifying nothing. And it's this quiet desperation that hangs through the whole album. And these themes are just embedded in the album, which gives it that timeless quality. The symbol, which was designed to represent thought and ambition, acts as a prism to the surface white light of our lives to let these dangerous themes emerge on the other side. As such, it's a quintessential concept album because it's a unified message to reveal these themes. Now, no one's really defined a concept album, so I'll do that for you tonight. I say a concept album is when the impact or import of the album is greater than the sum of the individual tracks. And for the mathematicians, here's a gratuitous equation for you, which says exactly the same, just in a more intimidating fashion. So how does it do that? Well, in a number of ways. The first concept album is sometimes cited as Woody Guthrie's Dust Bowl Ballads because there were songs all about the same, from the same place and along the same theme, or Frank Sinatra's In the Wee Small Hours about the pain of romance, which seems quite quaint at the moment. But the idea developed particularly with, for example, inventing a meta character that appears across the album, like Sgt. Pepper's or Ziggy Stardust. Or the reuse of musical material across the album itself. So the solo from Taxman in Revolver is used in Tomorrow Never Knows. They get two Voodoo Childs in Electric Ladyland, and so on. Or even creating gapless segues and transitions between the tracks, which means the album is irreducible, essentially, which we get first from Zappa and then later in earnest from the Beatles. And there's a presentational unity, whether the album is released in its entirety or in segments, or whether there's this unified message in the packaging and other ways of it that it's presented to the world. Now, this wonderful packaging must have been enthusiastically accepted by Dave Gilmour, whose parents were Cambridge academics. His dad was a Cambridge lecturer, the academic home of Newton, of course. And there's Dave Gilmour, still looking like Dave Gilmour in the bottom left corner. So this one album is just an incredible act of unification, and I'll show you a few of them. So of course it has two sides that breaks up the album, but every track on those sides is transitioned, is segued between them. There you go. And there is repetition of material from Breathe to Breathe, and then the same chord sequence is used elsewhere. And in that Speak to Me introduction, you get samples from a whole across the album there. And in fact, the very beginning of that album, which shouldn't be possible, is disintegrated by that heartbeat, which connects them all together. And those themes aren't per track. They're spread all the way through in this entangled, sprawling, but somehow incisive manner. What about the terms moon and sun, which Roger Waters said are symbols for the light and the dark? There's a great economy here because the word moon is in the title, but actually doesn't appear till the very end, 4 times in the lyrics. The word sun happens in the lighter side of the album, and then very aptly joins moon at the eclipse. There's a unification of key signature, lots of 2 sharps going on for you music nerds, and also of harmonic language and tonality. And when I asked you for moments in Dark Side of the Moon that really moved you, normally if we have a greatest hits album, we have a few tracks. Here we have this beautiful mess across everything, sometimes in the middle of tracks, sometimes between tracks. And it's like everything has the potential to move you and transform. So this moment here.
There's someone in my head, but it's not me.
Or this came out as very popular, the wordless emoting of Claire Torrey. Or these few seconds just before the solo in time.
No one told you when to run. You missed the starting gun.
And talking about guitar solos, for a rock album, you would expect a guitar solo in every track, but here you only get 3 areas of extended solo, as if the whole album's one track, or maybe 3 acts of one track. So let's see how that album was made. Electronic music is over a century old. The first electrical synthesizer is in the bottom left, the telharmonium. Here's Theremin playing his namesake, rather beautifully in fact, and Delia Derbyshire at the Radiophonic Workshop. Why still does it feel somehow alien, electronic music? And I suggest that it has challenged our evolved way that we perceive sound. So if we hear sound, we expect it to come from a certain place. It happens in that moment, and we want to know why it's caused and by what. And electronic music has the power to break all of those, the when, the where, the why, and the what of sound. So, for example, it can put sounds together that cannot exist in the outside world, only in our unconscious minds. Or it allows sounds that are in the external world to be compiled and curated into a musical pattern. So these are the samples from Money that were recorded in the studio, bags of cash being dropped, and then there's paper being ripped, which represents banknotes being ripped. Alan Parsons says, they were just bits of paper, the Floyd weren't that rich then. Maybe now they could do that. And in order to assemble them, these 7 sounds, it was a remarkable act. They had to literally cut the tape and then tape it back together again and then make it into a loop. But the loop doesn't fit in the tape machines, so they had to pass it around microphone stands and pencils in the room to make this work here. So this is the reordering of those, which you can do in 3 seconds on your laptop, but it must have taken them hours and hours. And this ability to layer sound is a remarkable tool in the composer's kit. But at the time, it was still limited. This was the state of the art, a 16-track recorder. But unlike today, there's no undo and no save as. You couldn't even record your tracks to another tape machine and put it back because the drift would prevent them from being in tune and in time. No copy and paste. I like to say that undo is the god of forgiveness when it comes to the studio, but they had no such god at that time. And to create this album, I like to say it's like flying to the moon, relying on a computer with 2 kilobytes of RAM and no screen, which of course they did. So this act of overdubbing is both a challenge and an opportunity. For example, it allowed the same person to double up vocals and also have recording sessions at different times. For example, the original vocals of Us and Them were recorded in 72, and then a choir was brought in of these fabulous ladies and musicians in 73. So let's see how they were stacked up. Gilmore, we're not sure. Richard Wright, and then the choir. Multi-tracking allows us to make efficient and convenient the ensemble recording process. but it also allows for the impossible. For example, Gilmour records solos with himself, so he has this instinctive, schizophrenic approach to these solos. So he could do something that's impossible in life, which is basically perform a solo with himself. I'll give you a little of it here. But also time can be displaced in a real-time manner with tools like the Echo Rec, which would record sound and then play it back. In fact, because it was a magnetic disc rather than tape, it would come back in quite a precise manner, so it could be used musically. So for example, in Us and Them, the vocals are selectively put through, and in Crotchet's quarter notes for our American friends.
Us.
So that's the original audio, and let's run it through with the Echo Rec.
Us, 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 us.
It comes in for them.
And them,
Just them.
them.
And then you could put two vocals through it,
And in the end,
and then overlap.
it's only round and round, 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 and round, 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 round.
And this round and round manner of this disc was used so creatively on the album. Here's Richard Wright's synth solo, illustration of it, where he plays one line and it comes back and several times. And rather than just an effect that trails off, it's actually like a impossible ensemble of synths. And you can take a familiar sound, like that of a clean electric guitar, and running it through devices like this, create this otherworldly sound. You hear that wobble and that uncertain quality to it, which means one chord has this quality between its endpoints. And of course, you can create sounds from scratch. Peter Zinoviev, the composer, inventor, and electronic music pioneer, created a lot of instruments which were used by pop bands and other people at the time. Here he is on the top right. He was the owner of the first home computer. Apparently he had to sell his wife's tiara to purchase it, which must have been quite a conversation. And there's him in his Cambridge again home studio in 2019. Now, Peter was a geologist and connected his scientific mind to music. In fact, this is a paper in 1958 written by him where he dreams of a future score which was three-dimensional, and you could just traverse it, and it had all these emotional feelings that you could pass through. So one three-dimensional shape could house many pieces. And that was just a dream in 1958, but in 2020 I worked with him to realize this, and there's a example of this, and he was just as excited about electronic music now as he was then. You can see him in his home studio. Now, one of the tools they used was a VCS3, and this sort of portable version of it, which had this novel pin matrix, which I'll explain to you, which allows you to create any sound you can think of, which was the EMS slogan. So, thing about creating these sounds you can think of is, as Varese says, it kind of cuts both ways. You can dream of instruments that are obedient to your thought. If you can imagine the sound, you can sculpt it. But electronic music and instruments are able to create sounds that can't exist in nature and things that are kind of beyond our imagination. And that rapidly happens and is demonstrated in Dark Side of the Moon. So let's show you how this works. So there's an oscillator that makes the sound. And I should start that now. There we go. So, and that's going straight to the output with that little battleship twig pin. We can run that through the filter instead and put the filter through the output, and then we get more timbral control. Then we can put all the oscillators they have through that same filter. You'll hear some more tones come in. Connect the frequency of that oscillator to this keyboard, and you have a playable instrument. There you go. That saved you 3 years of college. And with this, in fact, with these remarkable tools and a few other of these here, you can emulate real, in inverted commas, sounds, keyboard sounds, more sort of plucky sounds with a shorter envelope. Organy sort of tones with rich oscillations. And a Pink Floyd sound that you might be familiar with, where the high frequencies come out in this physically, at least acoustically impossible manner. That allowed them to do extraordinary sounds. Some are quite industrial. For example, if you take noise and drones, they're just from the oscillator. We'll run them through the filter, and then use this envelope, which changes the dynamic shape of them. And then we speed that up. We get a convincing helicopter. Open up the filter a little bit and use this joystick, which can pan and manipulate some of the frequencies. And you hear these sort of sounds through the album. And it also can create really bizarre sounds that couldn't or shouldn't exist in nature. Sounds like our house in the morning. Now, On the Run, which was originally called the travel sequence, used this synthy, which had not just those sounds, but an inbuilt sequencer, which makes it, in fact, the dawn of the computer music age, both technologically and in terms of stylistically, I would suggest. And the track represents Waters and Wright's fear of flying, and they were doing all this flying and touring, and they wanted to capture that urgency, that fear, that breathlessness. So shall we reconstruct it with that tool? So what we do is we start with 8 notes. We've got this tone, and we'll record in that sequencer 8 notes. Just those. We've recorded them. Now we can play them back. And because it's automated, it can be uber virtuosic. We're hands-free, so we can change the timbre, and we can play it faster than and more stably than any human can. We can overlay Nick Mason's hi-hat pattern, or even use electronic versions of it. Let's just bring that in on the top right. And use the joystick to control some of these parameters in this smooth. And we're getting close to it. If we start overlaying airport sounds on top, which they gathered on their travels, then we start to emulate the sound of the track quite closely. There's the helicopter sound we made earlier. And we get this squelchy sound that happens that I love. This all feels deeply expressive, but what do we mean by expressivity? And what can help us understand that term is when Claire Torrey was instructed to sing something emotional without words on Great Gig in the Sky. And what I suggest is that musical expressivity does two things. It mimics the sound of the human voice, both in its timbre, its phrasing, its nuance, and the sort of emotional contagion that you collect from it. But it also engages with the musical world, target notes and target beats, and plays with them in a teasing manner. So it's this intersection of vocal mimicry and musical expectancy that we get. And that is at the heart of the blues, is it not? You hear a guitar that mimics the voice.
Baby, please don't go.
And you get simple musical elements that are deeply expressive.
Baby, please don't go.
I say simple in inverted commas there. And now the blues at the heart of a lot of the players in the band, and in fact Syd Barrett named the band after these two blues musicians. I don't know if you know that. And we hear that not in sound but in purpose and expressivity at heart of the blues, this overlap of vocal mimicry and musical expectancy. Gilmour says himself that it's a magical thing, the guitar. You can bend notes, draw emotional content out of tiny movements, vibratos and tonal things. He never leaves any note alone. And he also says, I think a guitar solo is how my emotion is most freely released. My wife thinks that I should do interviews by listening to the questions and playing the answer on guitar. I like to say my wife doesn't think that. So let's take some simple elements and see how Pink Floyd used them for ultimate expressivity. This is a minor pentatonic. It's got 5 pitch classes. There's 7 notes here, but there are 5 unique ones. Here they are. What could be said with so little? Well, what Gilmour does, for example, is he arranges those notes in what looks like the rhythm of speech, with the breaths in between them. He also adds to them articulations and contours that feel like question and answer. So even with these 5 notes, we get this deep sense of communication that he brings across. What about something static? Well, the Money bass line uses the same 5 notes. But still there's room for nuance. For example, Waters bends up the 7th, somewhere between the minor and major 7th, to become the neutral 7th, and the same with the 3rd. Here they are. Can you hear it? And the 3rd. So together. And it matters deeply. What also matters is the micro-timing placement. The notes aren't even. They have a swing to them. And it's a swing that doesn't change, that doesn't stay the same. More clipped. You hear that? And all together you get this. So what we have, I suggest, is this expressivity that comes from somewhere between vocal mimicry, that emotional contagion of hearing it as a person, and the expectational play with musical elements. And Gilmour was amazing at teasing out targets and taking his time. A few more seconds. The guitar that comes in here. In fact, the idea that there is a language being spoken but that obeys a musical structure has been theorized by people like Schoenberg, whose fundamental music composition came in a similar time. And to paraphrase, because trust me, you don't want to read the whole thing, he suggests that melody comes from simple, memorable phrases, singable phrases that outline a harmonic skeleton. So for example, if we take this sequence here from Time, it has these landing points that you might use. And I'm not sure how Gilmour does it, but he seems to know what notes to hit when. He intuits them. For example, he might go through this sequence and impart these curves, teasing out them, but still delivering them. It's not noodling, it's this elegant play of expectations. Let's hear some of it. How about the targets themselves? And this is where the album really excels, is in the harmonic frameworks that Gilmour dances around. So here's another 3 years of college for you. So a lot of harmony uses diatonic language, that is chords and scales that can come from a major structure, the white notes or D major in this case here. You can think of it as on the stave or a 12 dot clock with certain pieces allowed, certain nodes allowed. So we could ask what chords can be built with this scale, and we can also ask what shapes could be made from this. And a lot of pop uses exclusively sounds from this world. So for example, the major triad, which appears here most readily. And of course, Pink Floyd used that. You might recognize it here. There are 2 more of these. Starting here, you can just rotate that triangle. And another one. There you go. But if you turn this triangle, if you invert it, you get the sadder sibling of the minor triad, which of course Pink Floyd also used. And there are 3 of those. And we could stay there in that world, which many people do, make very fine music. However, Pink Floyd go further. For example, they might take an E minor triad and then add notes to it to give it more color, like the 9th and the 7th. Which is lush, right? Here it is together, and you might recognize it in the piece here. Oh, come on. I know you're coming, it's so funny. I know you're with me. They also might expand the chords, so they'll take a D like this, and then add notes to it, sort of elevating it towards the sun. So D major might become D major 7 or 9, and combinations of those. And you'll hear that in Time, in context, 7th, and it expands to a 9th. Beautiful, such sunshine. Or this extraordinary chord from Us and Them, which is a D major but the wrong note in the bass, this G. Recognize it again. So beautiful. Or they might actually hollow out a triad. Instead of a major triad, they will take out the third and put a second there. So this is the sus2 of us and them, which they rotate up to E sus2. Nice, huh? But however hard you try, there are certain sounds that you can't make with these. There are non-diatonic shapes, like an equilateral triangle or a square, however hard you try. It just doesn't fit. But those are the sounds that Pink Floyd reached for, and that regularly appear in jazz, for example. And Richard Wright loved this album and has been quoted as saying he took chords directly from it. So here's the last chord of Blue and Green. I'll just play this passage here. After the bass, here it comes. That's it. Strange, mysterious chord. Here it is on its own. It's called a minor major 7. It's sort of a mixture of darkness and light. And it happens, in fact, in the same key in Us and Them. Here's Miles. And here's Pink Floyd. Almost exact voicing. And with the vocals.
And after all, we're only ordinary men.
So that gives us the triangle. There was another chord that has been reported directly as lifting, which comes in all blues. Here's the chord in question. This one. Goes up and then again. Here's the chord again. Doesn't appear in the major scale, but it's this beautiful bite to it. And it appears in Breathe, or in Time, the Breathe reprise. So here's Miles. Floyd. You can even segue the two. And that gives us the square. And the album wouldn't be the same without these special chords, I suggest. But what's really important is where these chords go. For example, that D7 sharp 9 is standard in jazz and would tend to resolve down a fifth. So Miles might do something like this, which sounds satisfying and resolved. A darker resolution is upper tone to a minor chord. It's called a deceptive cadence, which Floyd do. Yes, good. But they also do this, which is the weirdest. And it's hard to explain. It would take another lecture. But D7 to B minor shouldn't happen, but feels so perfectly wrong. As if there's this insight, this magical turn. And the whole album is full of these quietly desperate chords that don't resolve. Do. Let's take this one, In Time. Thought I had something more to say. This weird tritone and then a Phrygian cadence down shouldn't happen, but just feels right for that moment.
Thought I had something more to say.
In fact, the whole album is this teasing of resolution. It starts with E minor A7, which is in jazz would be called a 2-5, which would normally resolve to a D major chord. But we don't get a D major chord. We get E minor, F sharp minor, A7 again, B minor, and then this hollowed out D, and then a D minor. It's only till the end of the album that we get that resolution to a unequivocal D major. So what I've done is put the first two chords of the album, but gone straight to the final chord to see what it would sound like if they missed out all that fussy bit in the middle. E minor, A7. It's so right and so wrong, right? They've reached for the chord too soon, and it sort of shows that music is in that pain of not getting what you want and eventually getting it. It's delayed gratification. So that's a 33-minute and 20-second cadence for you. But those chords make us feel something. Is it a way of explaining, like Newton did with light, why chords make us feel that certain way? Is it magical? Well, we've got some way there. It seems to be that in some instances, in some music forms, for a plurality of people, we tend to perceive notes that are going up fifths as light and warm and reassuring, and ones that go down fifths as cooler and more mysterious. So here's a drone. Can you hear that? And there's the light notes. They're sort of uplifting, like a warm sun in your eyes. And here are the cooler ones. Ooh. So composers know this. Intuitively, they'll reach to the dark side of the moon to create this mystery. You feel it, right? This chill. And Debussy knew this, and many composers know that when you deviate from the light, you get this chill, but it somehow makes the light warmer. Pink Floyd used this at the end with these 4 chords, which turn one way into the light and then into the darkness. This one. Brighten and resolution. They used both sides of the moon, but they also sort of compressed them as well. And this is a sound they might have got from Miles Davis' So What track. Essentially, if we take a root and use 3 notes that are high, 3 notes down the fifth, we collectively make what's called the Dorian mode. And this is the harmonic heartbeat of the album. Maybe you recognize this. It's just E minor and A, but it keeps this balance between light and dark. If you listen closely, you might even hear the track come in here. Oh yeah. This is a signature sound of Floyd, who went on to use it in many ways, particularly in this track here. Here's the scale. And this 4-note motif coming up uses the ends of that line. Not sure how much I'm allowed to play. I'm going to do a bit more. Just for this bit here. So there's this balance of light and dark through that album. And many have reported this album as being just depressing, essentially. And that's one way of interpreting it. For example, it starts with this message, is that whatever you do in your life is all your life will ever be. And at the end, statement is reiterated, all that you touch, see, taste, feel, love, hate, distrust, save. But it's extended to say that all that is now, all that is gone, all that's to come, and everything under the sun is in tune. And that's married with this resolution to D major, which gives it this warmth, this message. But then it says the light is eclipsed by the moon. Well, Roger Waters says it beautifully in relation to brain damage. He says the album uses the sun and the moon as symbols, the light and the dark, the good and the bad, the life force as opposed to the death force. And he says, I think it's a very simple statement saying that all good things life can offer are there for us to grasp, but the influence of some dark forces in our natures prevents us from seizing them. And if you feel like that, I feel exactly the same too. Hence, I'll see you on the dark side of the moon. And this quote that's used as a sample from the Abbey Road doorman sums it up beautifully. There's no dark to the moon. It's all dark. And what's cut off is, in fact, what it continues to say, that the only thing that makes it look light is the sun. And then you hear a snatch of a Beatles arrangement from the Abbey Road door.
There is no dark side in the moon, really. Matter of fact, it's all dark. The only thing that makes it look light is the sun.
Rather beautiful. In 2019, Dave Gilmour did a rather lunatic thing and donated 126 of his guitars to save the pale blue dot we saw at the beginning. It raised 21.5 million, the most valuable music sale in history. That black Strat that was used throughout Dark Side of the Moon raised nearly 4 million on its own. And it sort of sends a message that it matters more what you give and what you love than what you manage to take and hate. And when you look back at a life, it's really that message. It's the laughs, not the cries, the giving, not the taking. That matters. The loving and not the hating. And it somehow gives us permission to paint our lives any color we like. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you so much.